we don't see any investor applications right now, but I think there's a distinction here, and that's the difference between an investor and a speculator. I don't think the investors left, but the everyday, I got to 55 years old and I don't have enough money for retirement, so I better make a big bet on real estate and risk it all. Those guys are gone for sure.
Welcome to the Tom Storey Show with Steve Karrasch and Tom Storey, where we discuss everything real estate or whatever else is on our minds.
If you mute yourself more often, this will be the best episode ever.
Well, let's see what the viewers have to say about that. Welcome back, everybody, to the Tom Storey Show. This is our last episode ever in 2023. And then unfortunately, we will be back next year. You like that? That's a dad joke, Steve.
Hilarious. That was good. That was a good dad joke.
Pretty good, eh? If you're watching us on... Yeah, we have. Absolutely. We've been hanging out together way too long. If you're watching us on YouTube, there's just one New Year's resolution that we have that we'd like to pass on to you, is that 66% of you watch every single week and don't subscribe to the channel. And Nolan almost didn't even come back. He's like, that is such a bad number, boys. I'm not coming back till it's 50-50. So if you want us to continuously have great guests, you got to subscribe. Does that make sense, Steve? Is that a fair way to put it?
Just subscribe already.
Nolan, can Nolan tell him to subscribe, actually?
Yeah, Nolan, let's do the soundbite.
Hey, didn't you guys have like some guys say that once you get a little bit bigger, some like really, really popular, like everyone in the country would know if you got a little bit bigger, few more subscribers, he'd come on? Man, that would be a good guess. You want to know who it is, you better subscribe.
Yeah, right. Tom
I like it.
Yet. Tom, you don't know this yet, but I am in contact with what I deem to be, should I say that big? Tom, I'm in contact with somebody that is so big, it's unreal.
What would be great is if you're just getting catfished.
Ron Butler.
We don't know him, but we should get him on because people love to hear what he has to say.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He's controversial, but fun and entertaining.
Yeah. People know who he is. Absolutely. Okay, so audio listeners, thank you for being here. I hope everybody is getting prepped for a very, very fun New Year's celebration tonight. Nolan, what are you doing for New Year's Eve? Are you hanging out with the fam? Are you going out partying like the old days? What's happening?
Partying like the old days. It's 2023, I guess. I don't know. Well, we'll see if I don't even think I can party like the old days anymore. Like now you're like, I'm just going to say everything controversial today. It's like now you have to take a weed gummy with your alcohol so you don't have the hangover the next day, right? It's like, I don't know.
I heard about a real estate agent that instead of giving like alcohol as a closing gift, they're giving weed gummies. I'm like, oh, that's a little weird, but it's just as legal as alcohol is. So if your clients are into that, you might as well think about it. Yeah, Steve, what are you up to for New Year's?
My favorite thing to do by New Year's, man, is watch that East Coast ball drop and go to bed at 9:30. That's the way we do it on the West Coast, dad style.
Forgot about that. Yeah, you guys are a little bit behind. We're in the future over here.
You are in the future. Every time I go to Toronto, I phone my kids and I'm like, I'm in the future. And they're like, we don't believe you. And I'm like, look, it's dark outside. And they're like, what?
Your poor kids. Speaking of dad jokes, eh?
So we got the three amigos back together. We've forced Nolan back here. At least, I think, Nolan, this is the third official episode. You've been on several lives as well, but the third official episode. So we finally convinced you to come back. And man, 2023 has been an interesting year in Canadian real estate. Interesting in the fact that I think it's actually going to play out opposite next year, and we can go into depth on that. What's your overall thought on what we saw this year with mortgage rates, with housing prices? Like, how do you look at this year now, looking back and go, well, what happened?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a year of bad lighting, so I got to fix that to begin with because it's making me crazy. Fine, we'll turn that off.
That looks good.
Yeah, I think volatility is kind of the name of the theme of 2023, and I think it's going to be the theme of 2024. I think the only thing that is going to be consistent between the 2 years is the amount of volatility and the amount of unexpected things happening in the economy that will continue to happen. And that's probably one of my biggest fears of last year versus next year is people not learning the lessons of 2023 and taking them into 2024 and making these same dumb mistakes, which is looking at forecasts, looking at what's going on, what's predicted to happen in the economy, watching episodes of stuff like this, where we're going to talk about what's going to happen in the future, and then basing decisions on that rather than basing them on fundamentals. And I mean, 2023, it's like every forecaster said the market's going to crash, the economy is going to go to be bad, there's going to be a recession, and then it didn't happen, and now it's like, oh, we've got all this Bank of Canada stuff, interest rates are going to go down, and they're taking the forecast at face value when last year they were so ridiculously wrong, but nobody remembers that, right?
It is interesting, eh? Like every year we look at the forecast and we recognize that even the top economists are more wrong than they are right. And then the next year we base everything on what's going to happen and what the new forecast is. Like they weren't wrong the last year, and we're just going to take them at their word. Are you buying into the overall vibe that we're getting from these top people that, listen, not only are rate cuts coming, but they're coming faster than we thought, going down?
No, I mean, I think at this point, I'm not buying into anything with respect to interest rates. It's been so all over the map. I mean, you look at the rate expectations between November and December. There's a 50 basis point difference between November and December expectations. That's a 0.5%.
Right.
It took a month for it to change a 0.5%. It could change back just as fast, right? So I really I'm not buying into anything. And then by the time this airs, we've got 4 of the 5 biggest shipping companies in the world who have stopped shipping through the Suez Canal. By the time this airs, I'm going to guess it's going to be 5 of 5. That has an inflationary effect, and it takes something as simple as that to change the outlook for interest rates. And nobody's paying attention to that yet. But remember what happened last time they let me drive that ship through the Suez Canal and I caused all that inflation, right? Like that was one ship going through there. This is all 5 of the biggest shipping companies in the world have stopped shipping through the Suez.
Can you educate me on that? Because I've heard you talk about that. You said that last year on this episode as well. How does that change interest rates and housing prices through shipping through the Suez Canal?
Yeah. So, I mean, what happened a couple of years ago, right, was you had 2 things. You had China not onboarding its economy as fast as we thought they would. And then you had the Evergrande that got stuck in the Suez for the better part of, I don't know, a couple of weeks. And that halted transport. And when you halt transport, that increases transport costs because now you've got all these ships sitting idle, or you've got them taking longer routes, which means there's less shipping capacity. And then prices to transport things go up, which leads to higher costs of goods across the board, which leads to higher inflation. Same thing if you have any sort of an oil crisis, right? You have oil prices go up, trucks, ships, things that transport goods run on fuel. When the fuel prices increase, that has an inflationary effect, and that's where you start to see bump ups in inflation again. So and what people don't realize is the things that cause inflation happen overnight. Like literally in a 3-day span, 4 of the 5 biggest shipping companies in the world stopping shipping. But the amount of time it takes for that to filter through the economy is more delayed. So we could be sitting here in January or February going, well, was that shipping thing an issue or wasn't it an issue? Well, if it was an issue, now we could be looking at higher inflation again, and we could be having a completely different rate forecast.
I remember you talking about in previous episodes how The Economist, like the magazine, would put out like things to look for the following year, and obviously they didn't have the pandy on there and everything else that actually changed the world. Have you looked through, have they put out that report yet for 2024? Anything that they think is going to happen? And these black swan events will come in at some point that we don't know, but anything like headline news that you see from that?
I haven't seen their forecast article yet, but they did at the beginning of December, as well as Fortune magazine at the beginning of December, both put out articles on how everyone was so wrong in 2023 with respect to their forecast. I mean, you even put out a video, Tom.
Yeah, I was wrong.
I think the title was "I Was Wrong."
I know it was actually "I Was Wrong" again.
Video. Yeah, we all put out that video every year, so that's the best clickbait we got. It's interesting you bring up shipping, because I have, that I can think of right now, 3 clients in the database that are all working at the ports, right? It's a big source of labor in Vancouver. And they're all saying the same thing, like the ports are empty.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the question is, are the ports empty because demand is low, or are the ports empty because there's nothing being shipped from overseas here because there's some sort of restriction on getting the goods here? And we're not sure which one that is right now.
Yeah, I think I think part of it, there's some certainty around part of it, which is that there's been an excess supply built up because of the shipping problems of 2021. And we're probably filtering through that to a certain extent. But a certain extent of that is also there's way less money in the economy right now than there was 12 months ago, which means everyone's fighting for the same dollars. There's less dollars available, which means there's actually less money out there to spend. And we're just kind of hitting the end of all the savings and the accumulated wealth, and people are dipping into that. And that's being signaled to businesses, which means they're probably not ordering the same amount of goods as they used to. And they also know that they could probably get it a little bit easier now than they used to be able to.
Nolan, the National Post put out an article yesterday morning, and they called it the 5 key questions for Canadian real estate. And I wanted to go over these 5 key questions with both of you and get your thoughts on it, because they're basically saying these will be the questions that people need answers to make an educated decision in the market, whether they're buyers or sellers. Okay, so this is Canada-wide, right? None of our specific markets. This is countrywide. The first key question was, will prices bottom for real this time? So they don't think, and maybe Canada-wide data is showing that prices didn't technically bottom at the end of the last year. In Toronto, they did. I think in Steve's market, they did. Calgary's in la la land. They're just shooting up. Like, they don't care what interest rates are. Everything's just selling. But so that's question number 1. Will prices bottom for real this time? What do you think about that, Nolan?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, I think the organization that has the best data on Canadian real estate is actually the Fed in the US in their FVREB database. We saw a 20% drop in 2023, and depending on the market, and that's in real prices, so that's inflation adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see it being greater than that in 2024. Like, I think the damage that was going to be done has more or less been done. The question is like, where's the exact bottom? That could take 3 years to pan out, or we could have already hit it. We won't know until 5 years from now, until we see it uptick to back to like mid-pandemic pricing.
Steve, what are you smirking about over there? What do you want to say?
12 months ago was the real bottom.
Well, in your market, it was. Apparently not for all of Canada.
For my market, correct. I am not speaking about anywhere else. I think looking at Canada as a whole is ridiculous.
It's a fair statement.
It's going to be stupid to look at it. But yeah, in my market, where a good portion of Canada lives, we didn't go below. And if anything now, like, holy crap, in the last couple of weeks has the market picked up. It's crazy to think that over Christmas, the market's getting busier. But inventory fell off the face of the planet last week,
which we saw coming.
And we're going to expect that when it rolls over to the new year, that we're going to see another 10 or 15% fall off. So we could be below 4,000 active listings again in our market. And interest rates are going lower.
So we've been told.
I think we're going to see a very, I'm not going to say busy in number of sales. I think we're going to see a very competitive beginning to the year, an extremely competitive beginning to the year. We had a client who hit the brakes because you know how you have, like, I don't know if you track with your buyers in whatever software you use, but there's like favorites or whatever.
Sure.
Like they'll move the listings into their favorites folder. They had 19 favorites in there. Like, these are one of the 19 properties we would like to come look at this weekend. There was not one of them available for showing. They all had accepted offers.
What price point and what type of property was this?
These are $500,000 condos in Surrey, which is a 1-bedroom apartment.
Now, if they were looking at $1.5 million detached homes, I guess they'd have 90 in the cart and 85 would be available, right?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Which is the opposite of your market.
Nolan, I got to take Pumper Steve and just pump him down a level, right? He's trying to bring the market back all on his own here.
Yeah, always pumping.
Okay,
pumping, or objectively looking at what I'm seeing as a professional in the marketplace. Couldn't be that.
I would agree with you. Now, the second thing that the question they had, the key question, and Nolan, this is where we need you to come in here. Have mortgage rates peaked?
No.
Hmm.
But my answer to that, the caveat of that is, what's the time frame? What's the runway we're looking at, right? Like if you're asking me if between now and when I pay off my mortgage, if mortgage rates have peaked, I'm going to say absolutely not. Have they peaked for this cycle? Maybe. But again, like if they let me drive that ship through the Suez again and I get it stuck again, that could change really quickly. I think I put out a video mid-December on this about, it was a video about the US economy, but the real purpose and the real tone of the video was about forecasting, whether forecasts are designed to be accurate or precise. And there's a big difference between those keywords. So think of it like from the perspective of a weather report. When you get a weather report, do you expect it to be precise, or do you expect it to be in general pretty close to what it's supposed to be, right? Weather forecasts are designed to be accurate. So in other words, you're going to, in general, like you're probably, when it's forecast to be 30 degrees, you're probably going to hit somewhere between 28 and 32, and the precipitation is going to be most of the time pretty close to correct. It's not meant to say, okay, it's going to be exactly this temperature in this spot at this time. And same thing for these rate forecasts. I mean, even the Federal Reserve in the US, who's now put out their most recent dot plot and is saying you're going to see probably a 0.75% increase in interest rates in 2024. Even the Fed is saying, do not rely on that, because our dot plot is not something that's meant to be precise. It's meant to show general direction, not necessarily be accurate. And you've got so much confirmation bias right now with everyone wanting interest rates to go down that, I think, will we see interest rates come down? Possibly, but I still think just as much likelihood, 50-50 chance that interest rates will go up versus down. So have they
Really?
peaked? I think it's too early to call that.
You think they go up in 2024 interest rates? What, from
I
Bank
think
of Canada or bond yield, like fixed or variable?
Bank of Canada.
Okay.
I think that fixed rates, you'll definitely see lower in the first quarter of 2023. I'll tell you why in a second. But I think from the perspective of the Bank of Canada, I think if you look at 2024 as a whole, even though the direction seems to be going down, even though everything is indicating they should go down, I still think it's a coin flip with the amount of volatility in our market of whether or not they go down 75 basis points or stay where they are, or maybe go up slightly. And even the Fed in the US has said, we're predicting 75 basis points down, but we're watching the data. And if the data indicates that we need to tighten, they're still saying they're willing to tighten. They had to tweak that after their last rate announcement, because everyone went, oh, everything's going to be good. Rates are coming down. Market went crazy, and they went, whoa, hold on a second, right?
Yeah, they can't be too positive about it, right? Or then the inflation picks up again, and they gotta kind of be negative. So most people that we've talked to, at least, or seen talk, Brendan Ogmanson was on the show 2 weeks ago. He thinks they're going down a full % in 2024. It's gonna be 4 rate drops of 25 points. Benjamin Tal was along the same guidelines. A lot of these, I just feel like some of the economists are kind of in the middle. Some are really aggressive on the other direction. So you're thinking, if you had to guess, from 0 to 100, or positive the other direction, going up again, what would be your guess for 24?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, like, I'm really cautious now about people thinking that I'm making predictions, because I don't do that, because forecasting is art, not science. But if everything is exactly the way it is right now, throughout 2024, my guess would be that, 50 to 100 basis points would probably be where they should be. My caveat to that is I think it's a coin toss as to whether or not things stay where they are right now at this moment.
Let's look at this a different way, Tom. Hang on.
Right,
Hold that thought. Write that down. Let's look at it a little different way. Personally, if I had to guess right now, I'm going to say 50 points comes off next year. But the reason
that's the conservative safe guess, yeah.
I'm conservative
I know.
Every way except for how I vote 50% of the time, which people don't know about me. Okay, let's look at it this way. I'm going to read you the dates of the rates announcements, and then you tell me if you think what they're going to do at that date. This episode is brought to you by Realty Ninja. Real estate agents, listen up. Realty Ninja has created over 9,000 Canadian real estate websites, and they are no joke. I've been using Realty Ninja in my business since they were a small little startup in North Vancouver. Tiny, dusty little office with old leather couch and all. But look at the ninjas now. Realty Ninja is the go-to platform for real estate agents in Canada. Websites are no longer a nice to have. They are a must. Your clients expect you to feature their listings in the best light possible. They expect you to go with Realty Ninja. The backbone of my real estate business is my website. I wouldn't pick any other company to host my website other than Realty Ninja. Don't believe me? Go to my website. Check it out right now. Go to krproperties.ca and you will see that it's powered by Realty Ninja and has been for over a decade. They have all of the features I need to grow my business year after year, including lead capture, mobile-friendly design, built-in SEO, and so much more. The best part of Realty Ninja is it's totally free to sign up, no credit card is required, and you only pay when you are ready to launch your new Realty Ninja website. And no, that's not it. Sign up today at realtyninja.com/Tom, and you will receive 20%, yes, 20% off of your entire first year when using Realty Ninja to host your real estate website. Their templates are super easy to work with yourself, or you can have the ninjas design something for you like I did. Not only is Realty Ninja the best product on the market, but it's also affordable. Listeners of this show know that I am as cheap as they come, and I've been using Realty Ninja for well over a decade now. Start your free trial today, and when you launch, save 20% using our link in the description below. And let Realty Ninja help you take your real estate business to the next level. And now, back to the podcast.
Okay, how many are there total?
There's eight next year. I thought there was normally 10, but there's only 8 next year that I can see here. According to Google, if Google's right. Okay, so first one, January 24th.
Are you asking me or Nolan?
But just go for it.
They're going to hold.
Nothing yet.
Okay. March 6th.
I would say hold.
I agree.
Agreed.
April 10th.
Potential cuts on the horizon. I don't know. I think they might still hold there, and then they'll wait for the next one to do the first cut.
I agree.
I think if everything's like the same as it is right now, they start to change their language in April.
June the 5th.
Is the next one in July? It's right after.
It's in July, yeah.
So I'm going to say...
Hang on. We're going as the data comes in. Come on. We're not... I'm just saying. June 5th. This is halfway now. This is the 4th one of 8.
I'm going to let Nolan go first on this one.
My gut tells me that they'll intentionally try to hold off until after the spring real estate market because they're really conscious of the real estate market's effect on inflation and everything else.
My thought is June 5th is your first quarter point down.
Okay.
Then July 24th. Happy birthday, Tom Storey. It's right around there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Day after.
I
think they go down 25 in July.
I think that's where they hold. And then we have 3 more. They're September 4th, October 23rd, and December 11th. So I think then your second cut is either September or October. And then you stay flat. So that's why when I look at it that way, that's why I go, okay, there's probably a cut. And there's probably a cut. And then a bunch of like flat in the middle. That's why I think that way. I don't think they're going to go cut unless you start seeing little big layoffs and other stuff, crazy stuff going on. Other problems.
I'm a little bit worried that if our 3 markets start the way that we anticipate they're going to start, which is inventory falls off at the end of the year, things actually pick up to start the year. Again, not necessarily in price or sales volume, but action. Things are moving quickly because they're not moving quickly right now. I'm worried the market actually picks up a little bit where they're like, whenever that first cut was going to be, they push it 1 more, push it 2 more announcements. But I think if you actually look, and I had to guess for next year, this is for my market, we had a strong 6 months and a very weak last 6 months of this year. I think next year is going to be opposite. I think we're going to start weak and we're going to end strong.
I think we're going to start super strong and then fade.
Strong on what? Activity or prices?
Like on competition. So there's going to be a bunch of people that wanted to do something because nobody's done anything because we're having super slow months right now. Those people are all going to come out. We're in a weird spot right now where you've got all these people that are going, holy crap, it was 639 in September. Now I've got 569 or maybe less in some spots. I heard of a 518 or something the other day for insured. That 499 that I heard about, by the way, was absolute dog shit. Like there was stuff connected to it that was unreal, and we can cover that. But
$50,000 cancellation penalty.
It was so bad. It was so bad. But you've got this gap right now where the general public thinks that the market is really bad, and you've got all these people whose affordability just went like, oh, I can get more for my money now, and sales are down. So the people that are acting in December, which we always say December and August are the best months in my market to buy. But you're going to have all these people early in the new year go, okay, I got some really good buys going on. And then that's going to start to catch up. And I think it's going to fade again after June and July.
Well,
right. I think we could repeat this year again.
We could, absolutely. Let me provide some color on that with respect to the fixed rates, because as of this filming, as of right now, this moment, 3.08 is where the 5-year bond yield is at. The last time the 5-year bond yield, that's what fixed rates are priced off of. So fixed rates right now are around 5%. Yeah, there's some under 5% mortgages that come with some stuff that Steve alluded to there. But as of right now, typical 5-year insured mortgage is probably around 5.19, 5.29. So that is almost a 2% spread between the bond yield and the fixed rates, which is high. The last time that the bond yield was at 3.08% was May 15th. You guys want to venture a guess what fixed rates were on May 15th of this year or last year of 2023?
4.5, 4.5,
4.59. So what that tells me is that the lenders, now there's some capital requirement stuff that's changed since then, but that tells me that the lenders have 0.5 point to 0.8% of bandwidth to move interest rates down if they want to get competitive. And think about this, we are entering a market where there isn't going to be as many transactions. We've also got more lenders. Those lenders are going to get competitive for that business. They are going to lower their margins. So when I said earlier that I think that fixed rates will come down in the first quarter, they could actually come down as much as 0.5% to 0.8%. Now, here's the big kicker. If that happens, if the bond yields stay low and the interest rates that consumers are paying remain low, the Bank of Canada could actually get away with not having to lower interest rates because the market's doing it for them, which means they could get away with not having to make any changes, because anytime that the Bank of Canada is going to make changes in the future, it's going to have an inflationary effect. So if they want to not have to do it, they can just create the expectation that they're going to do it, and that has the same effect as doing it without actually having to lower the rate.
I'm curious, Nolan, because before variable rates went on their little run here, for a long time, as long as I've been in this industry, the variable was pretty much always lower than the fixed, like normally. Now, I don't know how many times over history, maybe 2 or 3 times it's gone over the fixed. It's now been higher than the fixed for a long period of time. Is there any thought between Bank of Canada seeing what's going on with the 5-year bond yields? I know they're separate, that Bank of Canada doesn't want the variable rate to be at 7% with fixed rates at 4.5%, that will pressure them to bring it down?
I don't think it'll create any pressure, but it's what's called an inverted yield curve. So that's when short-term yields are higher than long-term yields. So short-term rates, variable rates are lower than 5-year fixed rates, right? And usually what that is indicative of is a recession. And when a recession happens, then central banks will lower interest rates. So usually it happens not as a result of the fact that those yields are inverted. It actually happens because those yields being inverted are a lead indicator of the fact that there's going to be a recession, which would cause the interest rates to go down.
Right.
So if there is a recession, yes, the Bank of Canada would be moved to lower interest rates for sure.
Now, the third key question, we're going to just keep following this list here. This is a fun one. It actually works out perfectly.
The answer is yes.
Steve, don't cheat. Should Nolan can't see our notes. Should borrowers lock in? Okay, so if your choices are right now, you're buying a property and you've been approved for a 5-year fixed at 5.2, or the variable is, I don't know what, 7, right? 6 high sixes or whatever after prime minus whatever you get.
Yeah.
But you've been told by all the economists that know exactly what's going to happen with their models, that rates are going down. They could go down a full point and then they're going to go down even more. And you're locking in for 5 years. Is there a chance that over the next 5 years, taking the variable now at 7 with it dipping down slowly will pay off more than taking the 5-year fixed?
Yeah. So, I mean, let me start by saying this. If there's a 50% chance of rain, do you take an umbrella anyways?
I don't. I'm ill prepared, but most people, the answer would be yes.
Yeah. But if you're looking at it, you're like, okay, or if it's like forecast 50% chance is going to be minus 40, you're probably going to take a jacket with you, right? I think first is making mortgage decisions, financial decisions based on forecasts right now is a big mistake.
Okay.
That's a day trading mentality that has come about since the early 2000s. And it's like, I'm going to make this $500,000 to $1 million decision based on trying to beat the market. You're not that smart. I'm not that smart. Nobody's that smart. So making that decision based on forecasts is dumb. So the people right now are going, take variable because interest rates are going to come down. It's like, are they? You
Right.
know 100% they're going to come down? Or you could lock in right now for 1.5% lower than what a variable rate's going to be. Okay, take your variable rate mortgage. And by the way, my thought process on this has not changed since 2010 probably. And that is that you always take the lowest rate you can get at the time you get the mortgage. So if fixed rates are lower, you take a fixed rate. If variable rates are lower, you take a variable rate. There's like 3 times in history where that hasn't worked. One of them happened to be early 2020 when interest rates went up really quickly, even though the Bank of Canada said that interest rates were going to remain low until 2023 or 2024. Oh, and we all chose our mortgage based on what they said back then. And now we're thinking about choosing our mortgage right now based on what they're saying right now. Like, come on, let's learn a lesson. So I think, 5% versus 6.5%, you're crazy to choose a variable rate mortgage right now. I think more importantly, you should be choosing a fixed rate mortgage with a penalty that's low enough that if interest rates do go down, you can switch, which means, and I need to say this really clearly and really loudly, don't get a 5-year fixed mortgage at a big bank anytime in the near future, because if interest rates are going to go down, you're not going to be able to benefit.
So would you say if you're going to go to a big bank and that's the option you've decided, regardless of all the education out there, you should be taking a 3-year?
No. I think if you, same thing, if a 5-year rate's lower than a 3-year rate, why would you not take the extra 2 years of certainty? Like if we're going to have a conversation about choosing a fixed rate, because that's what the market tells us we should be doing right now, let's continue to have a smart conversation about it and go, I'm not going to try to day trade this.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, like the best mortgage in Canada right now is a 5-year fixed mortgage from either MCAP, that's not their Value Flex product, it's their full featured product, or First National, or CMLS, or any of another like various 3 or 4 different lenders.
Are these insured, or can you do uninsured with these as well?
You can do uninsured with all of them. Yeah.
Okay.
But the key thing is they have penalty calculations that if interest rates do go down are to your benefit, as opposed to a big bank who's going to have 3 to 5 times as high of penalties.
I've got 2 more questions here, but I'm going off topic, off the list today.
I don't get to say lock in. I don't get to say lock in and just get your payment down and don't be a dope. Like,
Well, you
get your payment down.
just said it, Steve. So
Yeah, so lock in,
Okay.
everyone, right now.
Okay.
This is not financial advice.
That being said, one caveat to that: if you have a variable rate mortgage already and and you've been on a variable rate strategy, and you're going to stay on that for the next 20 years because that's the right strategy, I might stick with a variable rate mortgage if it doesn't have a fixed payment.
One thing we haven't had the ability to have the conversation about recently, Nolan, is our government, who everybody loves, regardless of which way you feel on the political scale, they have come out and there's a mortgage charter now, baby. So is the mortgage charter all fluff? Were all these things already in place? Like this list of things that they had that was going to save Canadians from high interest rates, is that literally just politicians being politicians? Or is there anything in there that's actually useful?
Oh man, I'm on a rip today. I'm in a mood. Okay, so let me start by saying that, like, if you identify 100% as liberal or conservative, completely 100%, you're just as dumb as the party you don't like. Like, I can't get past any of these. Like, I can't take a side on any of this. But what I can tell you is that, like, the amount of deception and the amount of we think you are a complete idiot from the current government that has happened in the last 12 months
Mm.
is like it's like they're basically publicly saying to us, either we think you are a complete idiot as a Canadian, or we're complete idiots. It's one of the two. You tell us which one it is, because like this mortgage charter thing, for example, is them saying us putting it as the federal government in writing dictates what the banks will do, even though we didn't actually make it a law. These CEOs of these companies are like, you guys are elected officials who are drama teachers and journalists. Unless you make it a law, we don't give
We're
a
not doing it.
shit what you think. Like, so this mortgage charter, I mean, basically the mortgage charter that they have is like the common sense best practices of banks right now. And they just put it in writing, even though most of what the bank they put in writing is stuff that the banks and CMHC and Sagen and Canada Guarantee have all been doing anyways. So it's like it's literally it's like a vote buying scam. It's like, we're going to say we did this so people think we did a good job, but really we did nothing, which is pretty much what we've done for like the last 5 years.
Hang on, let me this is how this goes. This is Justin Trudeau. Hey, big banks, what is it you're doing that's holding this crap together right now? Because I'm going to tell everybody that I'm making that happen. Okay, cool. These are the things. We're not going to screw people when their amortization goes all messy because we spent too much money. Cool. I'm going to say that out loud. Okay, bye. Thanks. Yeah. And that's it. That's the whole thing. They've just gone, like, everything they outlined there was stuff the banks are already doing. So thanks a lot. We appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, just complete garbage. And there's so much of that with this government. It's getting to the point where it's absurd how much they are doing to just kind of like try to pull the wool over Canadians' eyes. It's insane.
Now, one thing that has completely left the market.
Hang on. Are we going back to the list?
We're going back to the list.
Okay, good. I thought you were getting off the list.
No, I'm going back to the list. I'm setting it up, Steve. Okay. That's what podcast hosts do. They set up the question. All right.
I thought you were off the list.
I was not off the list.
I love a list. Number 4, please.
Number 4. One thing that has left the market in droves, but mostly on the listing side, is investors exiting the real estate market because their investments no longer make sense based on the interest rates today, because they cannot increase the rent. I'm talking mostly about Toronto condos in this conversation. Now, number 4 question, the key question for 2024 is, will investors return to Canadian real estate? Because they were a big chunk of the demand that kind of disappeared, and it's been very clear in the sales numbers. So do you think, even if interest rates do go down, they're not going down enough in the next 12 months to make a huge difference on what's going to cost you to run this property, what rent you're going to get, but do you think they slowly come back? Have you seen that at all with mortgage applications for investors?
Oh yeah, we don't see any investor applications right now, but I think there's a distinction here, and that's the difference between an investor and a speculator. I don't think the investors left. The people who are investors, professionals, guys who know what they're doing, guys like Daryl Frankfurt from the other Canadian real estate podcast, like, he's a pro. He knows what he's doing. I don't think he left the market at all. But the everyday, like, I got to 55 years old and I don't have enough money for retirement, so I better make a big bet on real estate and risk it all. Those guys are gone for sure. And they aren't coming back until the next time we see a run up in prices, which is probably another 15 years down the road.
Steve, what do you think? Are you having any investor conversations? Like, are you working with anybody?
Lots of people that think they're going to do it, and
but have not pulled the trigger yet.
No, it's just the conversation happens really quickly when I'm like, cool. They're like, I'm looking for cash flow. This is how uneducated the average person is, and why they need to get in touch with somebody who is going to give them the real deal, because they go, cool, I need an investment. And then we sit down and I'm like, okay, how much do you want a negative cash flow? And they're like, what do you mean? I finally got my 20% down. I'm going to now make money. And I'm like, guys, this isn't, like, break even is 40% in my market. And that's on a good year. That's with a low interest rate. So when we have that conversation, they back out really quickly. And this is where I kind of feel like this is why I have such a problem with pre-con. Because so much of pre-con is like, oh, don't worry, this is going to cover itself at this much down, and you don't have to worry about it for 4 or 5 years or whatnot. The people that were looking to invest as, let's call it a junior investor, let's call it someone that owns maybe their principal residence and they want to buy something else. Those people are, if they're educated correctly, they're not buying right now because they realize they can put that money in their RRSP and probably be better off.
But again, if you're what Nolan just said is an actual real investor, not a speculator. If you're looking at it right now, okay, so for the next 5 years, you're not going to be breaking even. You're going to be pumping in $500 a month or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But you're long term, and you're like, you know what? I look at everything going on. I look at the next 10 years of potential interest rates. I look at our immigration levels. I look at the fact that we are not building housing at the pace that we need. Yes, we're building some stuff, but it's going to be rental inventory. Are you not going, listen, the prices might be actually pretty low right now. Then 10 years is going to look really good. My mortgage is going to be paid off to 30% by then.
Do I get to classify as a junior investor? Because I have 2 sets of tenants. Is that still? But here's where my mind goes right now as somebody that's, doing okay. I'm like, okay, what's my next one? That's what I'm looking at right now. That's it. Well, and when Tom messages me yesterday and says, hey, look at this deal, what's going on with this deal in your market? And I was like, wait a minute. Is Tom reaching out to me because he wants me to be his realtor? Or is Tom reaching out to me because maybe I get to put some money in this deal? Like, that's where my mind starts going.
Do you want to put money in that deal? We'll talk about this offline with Nolan too. But we're moving a little forward with that. So we'll chat offline.
I'll tell you where... I'll tell you.
But I want to. Sorry to interrupt. Let me finish my thought. Yes, I'm looking at right now. How do I position myself to get the next investment, whatever that is? And I think that's where most people should be all of the time.
Here's where the real investors are going right now. Is they're going to building CMHC construction finance rental properties because there's now no GST on it, so there's a 5% lift thanks to the federal government, which doesn't affect most investors and most housing, but it affects those builders that are definitely not passing it along to the consumers, even though the Liberal government would like you to believe that they're not taking that as profits. It's an incentivization to build those properties, and that's where real investors are going right now. And the money's cheap on it. 50-year amortizations, like if you can do an amalgamation of 3 or 4 lots and build a property like what Frankfurt's doing, like that's where the investor money's going. Now, that being said, I think that now that we've seen prices come down a little bit, this is where if you're going to continue to be an investor, this is actually where you start looking for deals because you've got that combination of the prices have come down and then you're also trying to buy properties that you can add value to. And what people don't realize is it's not about buying a pre-construction is not investing, that's speculating and hoping the market goes up. Investing is finding a property that is way undervalued that you could sell for $100,000 more if you put $50,000 into it. That's being an investor. Or you could rent it for more.
That's super hard to do anywhere, like in our markets though.
But there's lots of condos you can buy in Toronto right now that you're buying below replacement cost. There's lots. That's interesting to me.
Everything's below replacement cost.
Not everything.
The question is replacement cost going to come down? Like I can buy 2x4s for like $3 now, which I couldn't do 2 years ago.
Do you need insurance? The answer to that question is obviously yes, of course you do. Whether you are a tenant, landlord, or homeowner, you need to insure your property and belongings. And when I insure my investment property, personally, I choose Square One. Square One is affordable online insurance for everyone. If you apply for your Square One insurance policy using the link in the description of the show notes, listeners of the Tom Storey Show can receive $20 off right now, simply by going to squareone.ca/the Tom Storey Show. Square One is no joke. I personally use Square One for my landlord policy on my investment condo. I picked Square One because they were easier to work with than other insurance companies. And when I had an issue with my previous policy coverage in relation to my Strata's coverage, Square One was the insurance company that came up with a solution for my insurance problem at an affordable rate. Online quotes take less than 5 minutes with Square One. Get your home insurance quote today at squareone.ca/the Tom Storey Show and save $20.
That's a good point. Okay, number 5, and then we'll end our little key question part of this podcast, which has basically been the whole podcast so far. This is a pretty simple thing, I guess. Will affordability improve? What do you think, Nolan?
Yeah, I mean, markets always come back to balance. The question is, how will it improve? Is it going to be incomes are going to come up, or is it going to be values are going to come down, or is it going to be cost of borrowing is going to come down? I think it's too soon to call that, but it'll definitely improve because markets always balance, for sure.
Steve?
Shout out Jordan Skrinko. Let me share with you the article that he brought to my attention, which is July to September. It was reported that Canada brought in 430,635 new residents.
July to September?
Our target for the year is 500,000 new permanent residents. Now, this doesn't say permanent residents, it says residents. So that includes, students that are now paying double or whatever for their tuitions and all that stuff. But that was in one quarter. So when our target is 500,000 people, we might hit 3.5 times that target. So how is affordability going to get better anytime soon? My actual real problem with this is not the housing market at all. It's going to be the healthcare system, right? Because last time I checked, you don't think they're building enough houses. How many hospitals do you think they're building? Canada's current population, when did we pass 40 million? It was like April or something, wasn't it?
Earlier this year, yeah.
Yeah. So we're now over 40.5. So 405,28396 according to this. So it has grown since January over 1 million people. Since January. And we're going to continue this rate, by the way, from now on.
We're now bringing in more people than the U.S. that has 10 times the population we do.
Right. So how is that going to work out? That only has people like Jordan, who I believe is, even looking at, I believe he's building projects and thinking about leaving the country even. And now he's going, holy crap, guys, hold on to your hats because this is coming your way. You can't funnel this many people in and expect affordability to ever return in the major markets. Let's get serious. Yeah. Affordability in a lot of places is totally there. No, affordability. I mean, we had Brendan Augmenton on Nolan, and he was basically saying their modeling is averaging at like 8% growth for the next decade still in our market in BC. Sorry, that's the whole province. And he says it doesn't affordability doesn't return for another 12 years or so. That's their modeling.
I think that's the key point is it's not a quick rebalancing. It'll take a while, but it will happen. And the way it happens is simple. Canada becomes a less attractive place to go to. The healthcare isn't as good as it used to be. The prospects for prosperity aren't as good as they used to be. People stop coming, people start leaving, and that equation shifts over time. But the question is it a 5-year timeline? Is it a 10-year timeline? And I can tell you when it starts to change. It starts to change in 2025. The best thing the Liberals could do right now is call an election because they might have a chance today. But if we get to 2025 and the affordability chances or the affordability, I saw Steve's face there. That was funny. The affordability numbers continue to get worse between now and 2025. They're literally going to get themselves voted out of office just on that issue alone.
But have the Conservatives said that they would actually change immigration numbers or targets?
Has not talked about that at all. Hasn't.
But I'll tell you what, when the election cycle comes up, that'll be the biggest point. And I'll tell you what, that PP guy will say whatever he needs to say to get elected.
Oh, 100%.
And then he'll do it, which might be even scarier.
How did we get to this level of wanting to grow the country this fast? Like, I was never tracking this before. I only really started to be aware of this, since the pandemic started and we started seeing these numbers. At what moment, and I get it, the boomers are getting older and we need more people to the workforce, and I get all that. But what was it before? Was it like 250,000 before? And one day we're like, let's do 1 million. Like, what happened?
Yeah. Pre-pandemic, it was averaging between 260 and 290 a year.
So what happened?
They need to support the spending with a higher tax base. So here's the thing: immigration is great for a country, and there's zero argument that when you have immigration, you have a growing economy, and in the long run, it is good for an economy. Where it's bad for Canada is when you do it without the amount of housing. But here's the dichotomy, and they're facing this in the U.S. There was a CNBC article. Maybe it was a Fox article. Doesn't matter. It was pretty accurate, regardless of which side it came from. But what they were talking about is the fight between monetary and fiscal policy in the U.S. So in other words, the central bank is doing everything it can to reduce money supply, but it doesn't really matter because the federal government's borrowing and spending, which has the opposite effect. We're having the same thing here. But the thing is, for Canada, is we need the higher population base and the higher tax base for the record amount of spending that is being done by the federal government. And that's the only way to balance out the amount of money that they're spending, which is why they're pro-immigration. And then on top of that, every single person that they bring into the country who comes in under a liberal government that accepted them is more likely to be a liberal voter as well. So it's a political piece, and it's also a spending piece. And it's gotten us where we are.
And there's not enough Canadians having enough babies, so that's the other option, right? That's what it needs to be.
When we have this many people coming into Canada, right?
But immigration, if the population kept growing and didn't drop down to an average of like under 2 kids per family now, you wouldn't need that, right? Like our population growth is negative when you look at birth and death rate.
Yeah,
right? It's negative.
There's also a 20-year lag there, right? Because you need to have the effective growth that you see from immigration. You either need to have the birth rate be what you need it to be 20 years ago, or you need to bring in people immediately that are of working age.
Mm-hmm.
There's one
but
thing
there's just not like most people I know. I think of my daughter's friends. Most of them are single children.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you're right. You're dead right. Like, it's because we're not having enough kids to support the growth that we want to have in the economy, right?
I've seen a trend, and I'm sure, Nolan, you've seen this too on YouTube, is at what point does it get that the people that are immigrating here, and whether they're using Canada as a passage to get to the States, or if they really wanted to always come here, whatever it is that they thought they were coming to, there's this trend, and these videos get millions of views on YouTube, is why I'm leaving Canada, why I'm doing this. And do you think there's anything behind that, or is that just a fun thing to click on because it's a controversial thing? And
no, I think the big one you're talking about is there's a gal, I think her channel's Living in Canada, right? It's a really well produced video, and a lot of these are really well produced videos, but they're looking at like $60,000 incomes in Toronto. And it's like,
yeah,
well, hold on a second. So you're looking at a minimum wage job living in Toronto, and then you're completely dismissing all the suburbs and everything else. Like, it's like you're looking at downtown condos versus minimum wage. It's like, it's a bad comparison.
Wow.
And then she looks at Vancouver as well. And I think that's why you're seeing so much growth in Calgary, is because Calgary has pretty significant income, average income. It's relatively comparable to the other big markets, but the housing prices are way lower. So I don't think necessarily people are leaving Canada, but they're definitely leaving Toronto and Vancouver for cheaper areas. And that's why you're seeing the areas like ours have more activity.
This stuff ticks me off, Tom. I'm so sick of it, because all of these whiners, absolute complaining whiners, are going and saying things like, look at the Philippines, look at Vietnam, look at Mexico, look at wherever, Colombia, how awesome it is here. Cool. You know why it's awesome there? Because you took all of your high valued Canadian dollars that you've earned here, and you're taking them to paradise, quote unquote paradise, and now you don't have to earn the locals' income there.
Right.
Yep.
Right? My assistant that's been with me for 10 years from Mexico City, she's not living in Mexico. Right? Tom, when you and I went to Mexico, I might have been with Darren. We're sitting at the bar, and the guy was asking, the bartender was like, just out of curiosity, like, what does this trip cost you? We went over the cost, and he's like, I just want you to know, for your flight alone, if I was going to pay the same amount as you did and leave from Mexico to visit Vancouver, just the flight would take me over a year to save.
Oh my gosh.
Just the flight. And he's like, now I have to find somewhere to stay. So people don't understand that when you go there and you live, sure, you might be able to go become a software developer and live on a beach somewhere, maybe. But let's face it, if you're an electrician, you're way better off in Calgary than you are in Cancun.
100%.
Right? It's just not going to be that, or any beach anywhere in the world. So stop whining because you're taking a perspective of coming out with all this cash that you earned in an amazing country. And now you're going to go to somewhere that has no infrastructure and you're going to brag about how, well, here I can have a cook. Yeah, but what are you paying the cook? There, the cook is you here.
Right.
Right?
Mm.
Like you're just a bunch of whining complaint. You're not going there to earn 4 cents a day. Right? You're taking your Canadian $100,000 income and living there and being like, oh, this place is way better. Of course it is, you stupid idiot.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. If you're betting against Canada or the United States in any way, shape, or form, I think you're insane.
Mhm.
Like the two best places in the world to live, bar none, quality of life. There might be some places in Europe that are comparable, but I mean, if you're betting against North America, I think you're insane.
Well, people are obviously betting for North America where their dollars are going because people from other countries that immigrated here put their money into Canadian real estate or North American real estate, and there must be something behind that, right? Steven?
I have 2 things, Tom. I know we're getting close here. This is flying by. I have 2 things. One, the big one is the EV thing. So Canada's done this thing where 20% of vehicles in the next 2 years have to be electric.
Mhm.
And within the next 10 years or 11 years or whatever it is, they have to be 100% electric. So
Are they going to
let's
start
not,
building us some chargers? Because I don't see any chargers anywhere.
well, let's not talk about that in the 60% of the land mass in the winter, electric vehicles don't work in them. Let's not talk about that. Like, let's not worry about that thing. These are all like downtown Toronto or Ottawa problems that they're like taking that perspective, right? But I'm sitting here thinking about this. So there is a complex by me of which my plan so far has been like, that's the executive condos I want to retire into when I downsize. Those are them. But currently I know someone that lives in there and they cannot run enough electricity to the complex to put in a charging station. They have the way it's just kind of right near, it's near a golf course. Like the electricity is having trouble getting there. They would have to run it from like 6 blocks up, run a new set of wires to get enough amperage into the complex in order to run these charging stations. And it would cost the complex something, I don't know, however many millions of dollars to do this. Right. So you've got, now that's one building. So you're building all of this stuff right now, and the new stuff might have charging stations, maybe. Most of it has no parking, by the way. That's the new trend. That's the problem I have with the Conservatives is they're talking about eliminating any need for parking anywhere in their housing builds, which I think is also stupid. But now you've got all these buildings, let's say the ones that are built in the 90s and the 2000s and now the 2010s and whatever else is after that don't have any of this infrastructure. And they're not going to be torn down anytime soon. So what are you going to do? Tear those down and rebuild? You're going to try and get EV charging stations in there? Right? Like how it ties to real estate now is totally unrealistic. If you can't have those vehicles have any way to get charged, what are you going to do? Go spend your Saturday every week charging at the station down the road while all of your neighbors are doing the same thing? Like, it's not realistic. This plan they've put in place is not only stupid for Canadians, but it's not realistic. And by the way, the manufacturers cannot make them fast enough to even get the minerals out of the ground in order to get us these stupid things.
Can I just make a statement?
Yep.
Sorry. Just to be clear for the viewers and listeners, Steve, you're not against electric cars or clean energy, right? You're just against the way that they're rolling it out and forcing it to happen. And there's the idea versus the implementation of the idea. Just to make that very clear for people.
You have to. So what they did is they adopted exactly what California did and went, cool.
Okay.
Well, guess what? California, a lot more sunshine, a lot more solar power, a lot more ability for those vehicles to work.
And way higher taxes.
And yeah, well, that
Nolan was driving his Cybertruck this morning, I think. So
yeah.
But your approach to this climate thing needs to be based on more than an ideology. It needs to be based on the fact that where the real estate is located. How well do you think the solar energy is going to work in December in Yellowknife when they get no sun for 30 days?
So what you're saying then is that the government is making more promises that they can't keep.
Didn't even consider if it can be done.
No. And they're treating it like it's putting a man on the moon, and it's actually significantly more difficult to completely change an entire country's infrastructure than it is to launch a rocket, right?
You know what the next one they're going to do? They're going to promise a free unicorn to every family in Canada by 2035. Sounds like a great plan. I want a unicorn.
But only if you're new to Canada.
Well, whatever. I'm just saying, like, the thought behind it. Listen, everyone in a sunny country by the border, 100%, let's run solar and let's get those people on electric vehicles and reduce emissions. Even in Vancouver, maybe even in Calgary, for sure in Toronto. But if you think that's going to work in half of these rural places, like, where are you going to charge when you're in Vanderhoof, BC? Right?
I don't even know where Vanderhoof is.
I have no idea what that is.
Exactly.
The next town over.
It's an hour outside of Prince George, which is a small town, so it's an even smaller town. So and sure, you have but you got to drive 2 hours to work every day. Like, this is what they don't understand. They think everybody's living on Parliament Hill and walking to work from their government-funded condo. Like, it's just not realistic.
And I think that's the point I've been trying to make, is they really just don't understand, and they don't get it. And I think that's why you're going to see the shifts start to happen. And the first one, I think, is going to be when there's an election.
Hey, friend of the show, Ravi, was with JT the other day in an announcement somewhere in BC. We should have asked him to pass along this information. We're too late now, eh, Steve?
Well, I mean, they're all toting the same. Well, they're toting the same thing now too, right? Like, Ravi brings in the, hey, here's our new house plans for our fourplexes, and then 2 days later, the federal government's like, oh, don't we have some of those plans? Did you see the wartime housing?
I didn't see it. I heard about this, but I haven't looked into it yet.
Okay, so this is what they did with wartime housing. They basically made these plans for these houses, and then they went, okay, you can build this house anywhere. And it took, so I watched a whole thing on it. It took, by the time the supplies got to the site, 36 hours to erect a house, an individual house. Most of them it did not mention if they were connected to plumbing, because this was the 40s, by the way, where it wasn't uncommon in my area to, you could still possibly have outhouses. So it was a 2-bedroom, 800 square foot, if you were lucky, house, probably a little bit smaller than that. First of all, they needed the land to put it on, which we don't have around here, right? Like, this is not realistic. Did it have a washer and dryer? Nope. Did it have a laundry room? Did it have it's so stupid. Sure, you could put up mini houses everywhere. You could put up container homes wherever you want. Go ahead, put up container homes. Who the hell's going to live in that? Do you know anybody that wants to live in a container home besides maybe an artist that thinks it's cool, or the homeless guy that doesn't want the tent anymore?
I think people will rent. I think people would rent them. I think it'd be a cool alternative to rent.
I think you would be shocked at how many people would turn their nose up for them and compete for a proper apartment. It's not realistic in today.
Oh my God, Nolan, Steve's on a roll today. Eh? He's a
mad
man.
I brought it out in him.
I have one more I want to get Nolan's advice.
Steve, are you going to be cranky in 2024 also, or just 2023?
I'm not cranky, man. I look back at the numbers this year and I was
He's enlightened. He's enlightened.
No, I felt good about the year. Like, how do you feel about your business year this year, Tom? Like,
I had my best year ever.
Really? Oh, I
Wow.
didn't do that good, but I did well.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
it was really nice to look back and go, holy crap. Cause I was talking, I think we were talking last week about people switching brokerages or leaving the business. And I'm like, no, we didn't have any problems this year.
You know, it's kind of interesting. And this goes back to Nolan. So we found out 2 days ago, this isn't like, well, it'll be public knowledge when I say it on this, but our team was number 1 in all of downtown Toronto for transactions, all of
Wow.
downtown Toronto.
That's
And I
my
was
favorite
looking at,
right there.
you know,
Congrats.
everyone else had a bad year because the market changed. And you know what made us number 1, Nolan? New business, YouTube,
100%. Good for you, man. That's awesome.
which is crazy.
I'm gonna get a bus bench that says my friend is the number 1 realtor in Toronto.
Well, it might only last. We were number 2 last year, so we've always kind of been there. But I never thought we'd crack it. So, but that's
okay,
because
last
new business
thing I want
sources.
to cover before we keep Nolan too long. We've had discussions about my personal mortgage.
Mhm.
It's up now in just over a year.
Actually, this time?
Hopefully, I got to look at the date. I think it might be April next year or next year, because next year's tomorrow. So 25. I want to go on record here. Let's have a guess, because I have a guess at where I'm going to renew.
At the rate?
At a fixed rate. If I take a fixed rate next year, and keeping in mind that I will stay with Manulife to keep the Manulife one
I was going to
portion.
ask, are you getting it from me or are you getting it from them? Because it's higher if you do it through them.
If you stay with Manulife, they will negotiate out your fee. They've told me. So they say. We'll see.
Yeah.
No, but just staying with your bank, you're going to save a little bit of a point, right? But let's say, for instance, let's say 5-year fixed rate in April of 25. Where do you think
April of 25? If it was April of 2024, I'd say you'd be 4.89. It's April of 2025. I think you'll actually be either pretty close to that or potentially a little bit higher.
Nolan, I'm going to say, you say 4.89 to 4.99. Tom, where do you go?
I'm going to say 4.7. I don't know. I'm just making it up. I have no idea. Yeah, it would be easier if it was like in 2024, the 2025. Who knows?
Yeah,
I'm going to say
I think
449 or less.
Okay.
with Manulife, not a chance. If it was with me, maybe, but with Manulife, not a chance.
Good point. 459 or less, and I'll bet you $100 to your favorite food bank.
Done.
Okay, so let's do this. So I have.
By the way, you're
459.
actually going to do really well on this because I am historically awful at this. This is why I don't do forecasting. So more than likely, you're going to win, which means you're going to end up with a really low mortgage rate, which is great.
Let's actually do an over under, because you said 4.9. So let's do an over under at 4.69. Anything under that, you pay. Anything over that, I pay.
Done. In tomorrow's dollars or today's? Because that could be like
seasonally adjusted at real values.
This has been my favorite one, guys. I like it.
I love this end of year episode with Nolan. It's always fun. I know you're not a New Year's resolution guy. We've talked about that before. But is there anything you're working on right now, or you've been working on for the past few months that you're thinking about personally or professionally going into next year?
Yes, I got a chance to talk to a guy named Jesse Itzler, who I don't know. Some people will follow him, some people won't. But he's an entrepreneur, incredible entrepreneur in his own right. But he is married to Sarah Blakely, I think is her name, the woman who started Spanx, and so they're billionaires. And he was talking about his theme for the year, and every year having a theme for the year. And next year, I've decided my theme for the year is relentless. So the main YouTube channel I have is flipping over to a more generalized global economic outlook, with it being a place where money meets mindset, which is really cool. I'm having a ton of success on that just recently. We're gonna have the Canadian real estate channel that is new, of course, that will continue to cover the old school stuff that people started following me for, and then just building out as much education as we possibly can around what is really complicated topics, like whether or not you want to follow a forecast to make $1 million decision.
And us three may have a surprise at some point in next year that we won't say anything about yet, but we're working on something in the secret lab right now.
That's going to be epic.
Which will be absolutely epic. Steve, what about you? 2024? What's on the docket?
I'm hoping to hire finally. I have a good prospect. Things are looking good. I'm hoping to do that. I want to. I'm taking a bigger role with not only volunteering but education with the brokerage as well. With Macdonald Realty, so they've been great. And it's just about trying to elevate the profession a little bit. And if everything goes well, hopefully, as Richard Robbins always says, giving starts the receiving. So if you reach out and help people grow, ideally it should come back to you tenfold. And I'm a greedy realtor, so I just want it all for myself, you know.
Do you have a word for 2024?
A word?
Yeah.
No. I don't know, maintain. Try and get my weight back. Try not to go back up 40 pounds.
Okay. That's all right. That's all right. I think mine's just going to be focus. My word for last year was calm, trying to do things in a calm manner, and that shit will hit the fan. But if you kind of just let it happen, and there's a Jamaican saying, there's no problems, only situations, kind of looking at life like that. You want to
I have a different one. That's okay. A good one. I like that one too. But I'm going to say travel. This year I actually have 4 trips planned so far, and I have never done that in a single year before ever. So I'm actually going to try and enjoy my family and all. You know.
And finally, Nolan, one thing that we should talk about for anyone that's listened or watched this long, are you taking on people that you're helping them grow their YouTube channel? Is it just real estate focused, or is it anything focused? Are you still doing that?
Oh yeah. So that's another big piece of it is definitely, actually, I just had 15 people join us as we're recording this on a Zoom call on a mastermind. They're catching it the last part of the show here. Hopefully you guys are okay with that. But yeah, definitely taking on a lot of real estate clients in the YouTube space and outside of the real estate industry as well, putting together a course on how to do that and build out a channel that is unlike anything that's in the industry. It actually talks about what we talk about, which is how to actually succeed on YouTube and build an income from it. So that's definitely a direction that we're taking, and yeah, have some really great information on that, and it's going to be a game changer for a lot of realtors as they need to scale because the phone isn't ringing. The people who blame Canadian realtors for propping up the real estate market don't realize that over the last 2 years, realtors really didn't have to prop up the Canadian real estate market because it was consumers that were just phoning them off the hook. They didn't have, all they needed was a license and the phone was ringing. These realtors are starting to realize now that that's not the case anymore, and they need to scale their visibility, and by far YouTube's the best way to do that.
I love it. Well, I hope you guys have an awesome New Year's Eve and good fortunes, obviously, for everything going into 2024. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the podcast this year. On behalf of me, Steve, and Nolan, who's been on this show more than anybody else, I know we all really, really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next year. Bye.
Like and subscribe.